read newspapers, periodicals, books, anything I get my hands on. And there is this dark cloud over our nation. It has been here since our inception. The cloud is getting darker. It is called slavery. Our founding fathers put that in the Constitution that it would be allowed. But I believe, in all honesty and with all reverence, that they only meant that part of that slavery, that part of the Constitution, to exist within the confines of the original 13 colonies. In 1854, a fellow mentioned before, Steve Douglas, and some others down in Congress, introduced the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which has the potential to allow slavery to extend outside the borders of those original 13 colonies into the new states coming into our union. I am opposed to this. I believe that slavery, if contained where it is, will die its own economic death. So I decided to come back to politics. In 1855, I would run for a U.S. Senate seat from Illinois, lose. 1858, the Lincoln-Douglas debate and election, I will lose. But in 1860, I will win the big prize of President of the United States. When Fort Sumter was fired on, and I called for those troops, those 75,000 men, to put that rebellion down, we all believed it would be a quick war, as they said. But it wasn't a quick war. It lasted for 4 years. I read the casualty reports. I follow what's happening. I go from general to look for someone who can lead, someone who can win. I finally find him, a man who can do that. The hero of Fort Henry, Fort Donelson. The man who broke the siege at Chattanooga, victorious at Missionary Ridge and Lookout Mountain. The man who laid siege to Vicksburg and captured it. His name is Grant. I tell my cabinet, I'm bringing Grant east. I'm giving him command of all federal forces. No, Lincoln, you don't want to do that. Grant drinks. If I knew what he drank, I'd give a barrel of it to my other generals, because he fights. When he comes east in our first meeting, tells me he's changing the strategy of the war. No longer will it be a war to capture Richmond, but to defeat Lee. Because he believes that once Lee is broken, once Lee is defeated, that the others will follow suit. They will give up. He leads a terrible campaign in summer of '64 as to the casualties. But he never backs down. Through the wilderness, Spotsylvania Courthouse, North Anna campaign, South Anna campaign, all the way through to the edge of Richmond and Petersburg. When the spring of '65 comes through, he will break that siege, drive rebel forces out of Richmond and out of Petersburg back across Virginia. Then on April 9th, Palm Sunday, Grant will send me a telegram. Mr. President, I had the honor to report that Lee has surrendered the Army of Northern Virginia. Washington breaks into celebration. I've never seen a city like that. Bands are playing, There are impromptu parades, songs throughout the streets. At night there's the luminaries. Washington and myself. Now when I go out, ladies wave their handkerchiefs, men tip their hats. I've not seen this in all my years as president, but it's happening now. On Good Friday, April 14th, Mrs. Lincoln and I will decide to go to Ford's Theater. We'll go to see a play called Our American Cousin. The start of the second act, I do something that's not accepted in Victorian society. I reach out and I take my Molly's hand. She looks at me and she said, what would Clara Harris, who's sitting behind us, what would she say if she saw us doing this? I said, she would have to believe that we were involved. Shortly after that, Mr. Booth fired a shot. One shot, rendering me unconscious. I'll be carried across the street to the Peterson boarding house, and without ever regaining consciousness, at 7:22 the next morning I will pass into history. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's kind of the story of Abe Lincoln. Man, as I said, from poverty with no education to the highest office in the land. I've been grateful for the life I've had. I've been honored. I feel humbled by the fact that people are remembering me, that seem to take delight in meeting me, talking to me, and just sharing some stories together. You know, I'm known for giving a lot of speeches. Next week will be the 150th anniversary of the speech in a little crossroads town in Pennsylvania. On July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, 1863, 160,000 men will clash and rage a battle of the living for 3 days. There will be 50,000 casualties. But as history has come to believe, it is the turning point of the war. Lee was defeated and driven back. Quite appropriately, the Union dead were gathered up. Governor Curtin of Pennsylvania declared certain lands to be a cemetery for those who fell fighting for our union. I am invited to give a few appropriate remarks. The gentleman speaks in front of me, Senator Edward Everett of Massachusetts. He will speak for some 2 hours. At the end, men applaud, ladies cheer, men throw their hats in the air, the ladies wave their handkerchiefs. I'm still not sure whether they were cheering for the content of his speech or the fact that he concluded his speech. But it came my turn. 407 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are men on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we do so. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will no longer remember what we say here. But it must never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. But we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, will have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I've talked to you for a long time. I know these fellows get tired of standing there. And I thank you for being attentive. I appreciate you coming out. I know these gentlemen appreciate it. Our troubadour, why don't you give them all another hand? Thank you so much.